Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 20, Text 15, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of ISKCON. Dridhang Panditam Anyagyaha Stabdosya Smadupekshaya Matchasanati Goyastvam Achirad Prashyase Shriyaha. Translation. Although you have no knowledge, you have become a so-called learned person, and therefore you dare to be so impudent as to disobey my order. Because of disobeying me, you shall very soon be bereft of all your opulence. Who's speaking to who? Shukracharya speaking to Bali Maharaj. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Bali Maharaj was not Pandit Mani, or one who falsely assumes himself learned. Rather, he was Pandit Manya Gyaha, one who is so learned that all other learned persons worship him. And because he was so learned, he could disobey the order of his so-called spiritual master. He had no fear of any condition of material existence. Anyone cared for by Lord Vishnu does not need to care about anyone else. Thus, Bali Maharaj could never be bereft of all opulences. The opulences offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead are not to be compared to the opulences obtained by Karma Kanda. In other words, if a devotee becomes very opulent, it is to be understood that his opulence is a gift of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such opulence will never be vanquished, whereas the opulence achieved by one's fruitive activity may be vanquished at any moment. Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, considered his books his most important contribution to human society. He made many contributions, not the least being the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but he considered his books even more important than his personal preaching. His books are Shastra, based on Shastra, and the commentaries of the Acaryas, because Shastra has to be understood through the Acaryas. If we try to understand Shastra simply by our own learning, it's impossible actually. Even though Shastra is the word of God meant for the upliftment of man, we're so damn stupid we can't understand it. We have to have it explained for us. Just like, for instance, we have in this 8th canto which we're reading now, there is also the description of the Mohini Murti, how Lord Shiva was chasing Mohini Murti. So without the explanations of the Acaryas, it's impossible to understand this pastime. We won't find Shuddha Bhakti. Every word of Srimad Bhagavatam is only meant for glorification of Krishna and the process of devotional service. But without the commentaries of the Acaryas, we may not find that. We may find something different. Does that mean that the Acaryas are just kind of twisting it to make everything to fit into pure devotion? That's how some scholars, there's a good word for scholars which is coined by Sadaputa Prabhu, these mundane scholars, he calls them squalors. You don't know what squalor means, huh? Squalor is an English word which means all dirt and filth, and so he calls them squalors. So some mundane scholars, they have accused Srila Prabhupada that his Bhagavad Gita as it is, he has forced the meaning of every verse to explain bhakti. That is not really Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's his interpretation according to the bhakti school. So Shivaram Maharaj has done a very elaborate analysis to show how Bhagavad Gita as it is really is as it is. That when Prabhupada translates yogi as devotee, and the mundane scholars, they protest, it doesn't say devotee, it says yogi. Shivaram Maharaj has pointed out that Srila Prabhupada's commentaries and his translations, they are to illuminate the meaning of Krishna. Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, who is his pure devotee, with the particular purpose of establishing pure devotion. So others may misunderstand, but the actual purport of every line and every verse and every word is pure devotion to Krishna. Krishna never advised Arjuna that you should tasmat yogi bhava Arjuna. He never recommended that you be a mundane yogi. You be a yogi, but what kind of yogi? What's the next verse which comes after this line? Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shraddhavam bhajate yoma samyuktatamo mata. This is my opinion, Krishna says. So to hell with everyone else's opinion. This is Bhagavad Gita. Krishna gives his opinion. So we accept the opinion of Krishna and those who follow in the footsteps of Krishna. And therefore we have to understand through the Acaryas. Because the Acaryas, they are inspired by Shuddha Saraswati. Saraswati, she is the goddess of learning, which no doubt persons like Shukracharya, he's also an Acharya, he's also learned in Shastra. So he's getting influence from Saraswati, who is the representation in this material world of Shuddha Saraswati, who is the original form of Saraswati, whose only purpose is to directly glorify Krishna. But her counterpart in this material world, she helps persons to become, according to their desire, she helps persons to become more bewildered in the name of becoming learned, which is what mundane education is all about. That you become more bewildered and at the same time you think that you are becoming more enlightened. You're going 100% in the wrong direction, but you think, I'm going in the right direction. Jara vidya jato maya bhai bhav tomara bhajane badha moha janamaya anitya samsare jeevke kare gadha. You should all learn this, all you great scholars of monumentally useless topics such as engineering, how to build bridges and how to make machines and all kinds of facilities for living in this material world and forgetting Krishna. So it appears to be learning, but it is learning, but it is learning how to forget Krishna, which we're already doing. So real learning means how to remember Krishna. So this, did you all get that? Joro Vidya Joto Mai. Can you understand? Joro Vidya, Jora Vidya means this, what you're all doing. Wasting, anyway, Hare Krishna. Mundane learning is simply an exhibition of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it is an obstacle to one's worship of Krishna. Tomar bhajane banta. Moha janamaya. It causes one's illusion to, it gives birth to even greater illusion in this temporary material world and causes the jiva to be just like an ass. Of course, it's possible to use anything in Krishna's service. Prabhupada even described once how you can use stool in Krishna's service as fertilizer. However, we should take shelter of the Acaryas for real learning, those who are inspired by Shuddha Saraswati. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Prabhupada is quoting him in his purport, is describing through the grace of Shuddha Saraswati, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is describing how the words of Shukracharya, which are meant to castigate his disciple, his ex-disciple, Bali Maharaj, these words appear to be insulting Bali Maharaj, but actually, by the grace of Saraswati, he spoke words that can be understood in a different way also. Pandita Mani, you think yourself a great scholar. Shukracharya is insulting or chastising Bali Maharaj in this way. Indradev said the same thing about Krishna. But here, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Pandita Mani, you think yourself a great scholar, one who thinks himself, but actually you are Agya. You are Agya, without knowledge you are foolish. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has reanalyzed this, that if you, instead of saying Pandita Mani and Agya, these two insulting words, two insulting terms, that this may be joined as one word, Pandita Manya Yaha. That becomes Pandita Manya, one who is worshipped or accepted by Pandits. And Gya, not Agya, Gya, one because he is himself so much learned. Can you see if you say this? Instead of Pandita Mani, Agya, he breaks it up as Pandita Manya Yaha. So in this way, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has shown how Shukracharya, his words were inspired by Saraswati to praise Bali Maharaj, that actually you're doing a very good thing by rejecting me. He never meant to say that. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given this analysis. Now, this may sound, what I'm going to say next, may sound shocking to you. But it is my analysis that this principle of understanding Shastra and understanding Acaryas, this goes on, even though Prabhupada, this goes on in course of time, and even though Prabhupada's books are written very simply and very straightforwardly, to understand Prabhupada's books properly, you have to be guided also by an Acharya, to have the association of devotees. Just like the next line in the purport, Prabhupada writes, because he was so learned, he could disobey the order of his so-called spiritual master. How are you to understand that? If you become very learned, here Prabhupada says, you can disobey the order of your spiritual master. Did you hear that? Prabhupada said that. So, maybe your guru doesn't know all the verses of Bhagavad Gita, so all you have to do is learn all the verses of Bhagavad Gita, if you have enough brains to do it. I don't. Then you can disobey the order of your spiritual master. See, Prabhupada said. Right? Rather, you should, even if you become so much learned, it may be that some devotees are more learned superficially than their spiritual master. Superficially means they may know more shlokas and this and that. I know some of my disciples, they're going to go past me. I've got many years of many years ahead, time ahead of them for studying and learning, but they're going to go ahead of me, I can see. They're learning, and they're studying Shastra, picking up slokas very quickly. In course of time, they're going to be, in terms of learning, ahead of me. And especially here in India, you see, there's still that the Rishi blood is flowing in the veins. Of course, it's not exactly genetic, but that culture is still there, and there's still many intelligent people, and then when they take to Krishna consciousness, then very quickly they can pick up philosophy and pick up so many slokas, and we'll find that ourselves we're not coming from the Rishi cool, we're coming from the Mlecha cool. So this is also an exhibition of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's and Srila Prabhupada's mercy, that even persons, myself, coming from very degraded background, but can take the position of Guru, which is almost ridiculous if it wasn't to demonstrate the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But we can see that generally persons who are born in India, although we're all Atma, but generally persons who are born in India, they have a more exalted culture and background, and even nowadays if they're brought up practically without any of that culture, still they can take to Krishna consciousness very easily, very naturally, and very simply. The other evening here, we did this program in Pune, I was making this comment that you're all Rishi Putras, but by the influence of modern life, you're becoming Rakshasas. So after the program, it's true, what could I say? So after the program, there was a group of children, and they were just all sitting around together and chanting very enthusiastically, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. No one was there telling them you should do it, but just automatically they came together and were doing that. So I commented to one devotee, I said, this is very nice. And he said, yes, they're Rishi Putras. So that still, that despite everything, despite India being so much fallen, and even I'm shocked. I first came to India in 1976, and then the difference between then and now, it's amazing how India so much lost her culture, and it's so much trying hard to lose it more and more. But still, that tendency is there. And we find that in India in the West people get fed up with material life, but they're very determined kind of people. And they go on trying, very stubbornly. Whereas in India we see that people, they very quickly they get fed up with material life, and then they can take up to Krishna consciousness very easily. That's one good thing about the modernization of India, is that very quickly people, they become fed up with all this. Another good thing, there are different factors. Another good thing is that people, if they're not brought up with their mumbo-jumbo Hinduism, then they can take up Krishna consciousness without the influence of all the different smarta ideas, demigod worship ideas, and so many. Without having so many wrong ideas, they can take up the right idea more easily. Prabhupada said that was a good thing about the West, that the people, they didn't know anything, so they're easier to teach. Another good thing might be that you see there's always this big divide, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. Do we have any devotees here from non-Hindu backgrounds? All Hindu, see, so that's about 15% of the population of India we miss automatically, because they think this is a Hindu movement. And Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Mostly we don't touch. Actually, we mostly only touch the caste Hindus. Even the Dalits, as they're called. We hardly touch them at all. That's another huge population, huge sector of the population. So one thing with the secularization of India is that there isn't that much among educated people. There isn't that much difference between Hindus, Muslims, and Christians. They're all just sense enjoyers anyway, and they're brought up with modern secular ideas. So it may be easier to bring them, even Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, whatever, to Krishna consciousness, because they have the same kind of practically non-religious background anyway. So what were we talking about? We're supposed to be following the Acaryas, yes. So the Acaryas, they can describe, they can help us to understand Shastra. Otherwise, without the guidance of Acaryas, it will be very difficult. And that point I wanted to make, that even to understand Prabhupada's books, we need some guidance also. And we see that like tends to attract like. Birds of a feather flock together. That, or in more traditional term, yata guru tata shishya, which is not always true. But if the shishya is actually under the shashan of the guru, then he should become like the guru. If he's not actually a shishya, if he's only... Shishya means under the shashan, under the control. But if he's not actually, if he's only making a show, sometimes we talk about bogus gurus. Well, there are bogus disciples also. So if he's a bogus disciple, even of a genuine guru, then he won't be like the guru. But they're different, even you see among the disciples of Prabhupada, everyone's committed to follow Prabhupada, those who are actual disciples. It's not that everyone who sat in a sacrifice and said Swaha and got some name is an actual disciple of Prabhupada, because disciple means those who follow. If they're not following them, they're not a disciple. Simply getting a name doesn't mean that you're a disciple. You have to follow. So those who are following, there may be different moods, different stress on different nuances or different approaches in Krishna consciousness. So disciple naturally tends to be very much influenced by their guru, but the guru, his qualification, only qualification, is that he follows his own guru. It's only qualification. Only qualification means he should also be follow, and he should also be learned enough to dispel the doubts of the disciple. But he should be a strict follower. Otherwise, if he's not a proper disciple, then he can't be a guru. Then it becomes meaningless. So here it said, because he was so learned, he could disobey the order of his so-called spiritual master. So the key words here are so-called. It's not that if you become learned, then you can just disobey the order of your spiritual master whimsically. I know better than you. That happened even with Prabhupada, actually. One of his disciples became a great Sanskrit scholar, so great a scholar that he found out that he could understand Shastra better than Prabhupada. Ha ha ha, what a rascal. That rascal is still a rascal. And he's still making propaganda. Such a big rascal. He's making propaganda against Prabhupada on the internet. Such a big rascal. He's a rascal because he's offending Prabhupada, and he's also offending Yamaraj. He's offending Yamaraj by giving him so much extra work. He'll have to... So he becomes a very extremely offensive person. He thought now I know Sanskrit. But learning Sanskrit, that is not the qualification to be a guru. Generally, it's thought that guru can understand Sanskrit because Shastra is mostly written in Sanskrit. The original Ved is that's in Sanskrit. But that in itself is not the qualification to be a guru. Just like one professor, I think it was in America, Sanskrit professor, whatever, he asked Prabhupada in a challenging mood that, what is the meaning of surrender? And Prabhupada said to a disciple, bring a dictionary. He said, no, I want the original Sanskrit meaning from how you've translated this word. Prabhupada said, then you don't need a spiritual master, you need a Sanskrit teacher. He didn't accept this, that you should challenge him on the basis of Sanskrit. So it's not that, you see, it may be that in some cases the disciple apparently surpasses the spiritual master. That's another surprise. But if it were not so, then the parampara would always be in regress. The disciple always thinks himself less than his guru. But unless the disciple is actually competent to act as a guru and guide others, if he's actually less than the guru, then always the parampara will be declining in potency. You follow that? So it may be that in some cases the disciple is apparently more qualified and competent than the guru. And we see in the course of history that there are various great Acaryas, and even Rupa Goswami Prabhupada states that one of the principles, 64 principles of devotional service, one should follow in the footsteps of the great Acaryas. So some distinction is made between great Acaryas and then we can't say an ordinary guru. A guru is never ordinary, but there are certain Acaryas who are exceptional, and on the basis of this, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, on the basis of this understanding, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur drew out a line of parampara, Bhagavat parampara. Now you'll see in the list that we get at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita as it is, for instance, you'll see that after Narottam Das Thakur is placed Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who there's a gap of some more than 100 years between the passing of Narottam and the birth of Vishwanath. And definitely Vishwanath wasn't the disciple of Narottam. There were two gurus in between. And then after Vishwanath is given Baladev Vidyabhushan, who again wasn't a disciple, and then is given Jagannath Das Babaji, and then there's again a gap of time. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj definitely had there's no disciplic contact in terms of guru-disciple, in terms of formal initiation. And then again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his initiating guru wasn't Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. So some people criticize this, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained that he was showing the names of the prominent gurus in disciplic succession. Otherwise, if you want to put them all the gurus since the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there have been literally thousands. There's so many branches of the Chaitanya tree. However, even though so we can see just like that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his achievements in devotional service, what he did for spreading Krishna consciousness, what he gave to the world, is more than that of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, who was his guru. But I just said that, but actually we don't say like that. Because he himself always considered, and actually it is not only a matter of, it is not simply a matter of politeness, but it is an actual transcendental fact that one can only act, a preacher can only act on the basis of the mercy he receives from his guru. So even though one may appear to be more eloquent or more learned, or more effective in preaching, or more renounced, or whatever, more, this is the one's guru, then you should only consider and understand that it's only possible by the mercy of my guru. And if one starts to think that, well, I'm doing pretty good here, I'm better than my guru, then you become a dog again. Punam mushikava, you become a rat, actually. So how does this fit in with Bali Maharaj rejecting Shukracharya? He rejected him because he rejected Shukracharya because for all his learning he wasn't a devotee at all. He was against the sense of servitude to Vishnu. He understood it theoretically, but he didn't properly practice it in his life. We'll find after this whole incident how Shukracharya is glorified Lord Vishnu. Although Shukracharya has taken the position of the guru of the enemies of Vishnu. But Lord Vishnu, he also he appreciates Shukracharya. What is that? Kavinam, Ushanam, what is that? Asmi. He says, among the learned, Lord Krishna says that in this material world, what are my vibhutis or representations of my opulence? The representation of my opulence among learned persons is Shukracharya. But for all his learning, he himself, Shukracharya, was Pandita Mani. He thought himself very learned. It must be a great shock for him that his disciple, who definitely wasn't as learned as him in terms of Shastric knowledge, he was Bali Maharaj, was turning to Shukracharya. He depended upon him for the execution of the rituals and for guidance and for power. He was a Kshatriya, Bali Maharaj, but he understood that my power comes not simply from my ability to wield weapons, but it comes from the blessings of the Brahmanas. Now this is very interesting because Shukracharya, he wasn't a devotee, but nevertheless he had acquired the ability to give material power to others, that he could bless. He was by the Brahma Teja, by the blessings of Shukracharya and the Brahmanas, Bali Maharaj was able to overcome the heavenly planets. He was able to overturn the the standard cosmic order because of the blessings of Shukracharya. So how did Shukracharya become powerful? Shukracharya became powerful by his adherence to the Vedic principles, by his chanting of Vedic hymns. So the Vedic hymns, they give power. They can give. The Ved is, that is stated that Nigama Kalpa Taru. Nigam means the Ved. Nigam and there's Agam. So Nigam means Nigama means the Ved. And that is like a wish-fulfilling tree. So one's material desires can be fulfilled through the Vedic process. And the bulk of what is considered the original Veda, that is concerned with his karma kanda activities, which Shukracharya was expert in. So it is the fact that one gets power, one can get material power from following the Vedic process. Of course, it's not just a matter of reciting the mantras. One also gets power from performing austerities. So when these two things, austerity and Vedic knowledge, are combined, it becomes very, very powerful. So, but this Shukracharya, he had acquired knowledge, very deep knowledge, but on the material platform. So Bali Maharaj was not as learned as Shukracharya, but he had understood the essence. By the grace of Prahlad Maharaj, Bali Maharaj had understood the essence of Vedic knowledge, which is to surrender to Vishnu. And his surrender was so exemplary that his very name has become identified with the process of surrender. So he understood the essence. It's not always that book knowledge means that one understands. Practical understanding can be something different. Just like Prabhupada told this story of there's one big machine in a engineering works, and a very big complex machine, and one day it broke. So they called in so many big engineers, and they couldn't mend it. And then they called, so then the boss of the company, he called one of the workers who was retired and asked him to mend it. And the man was not a highly skilled engineer, but he had been working with that machine for years, and he immediately fixed it. There's another similar saying in America, a story that someone was called to fix a machine. He took a look at it, made a little adjustment, gave the bill, $100. He tapped it with a hammer, gave a bill for $100. He said, $100? You just tapped it with a hammer. He said, can you give me a detailed breakdown of how it comes to $100? So he said, he wrote down, labor, tapping with the hammer, $1. For knowing where to tap, $99. So that it may be that the big scholars with their theoretical knowledge, they don't know what is the essence, which is to surrender to Krishna. Whereas the devotees, they do. We find that that's very common in the modern age also. It's becoming less common as India becomes more or further away from our own culture. But still now in India you meet there are a few here and there, scholars. Maybe in Pune there are more. This used to be famous as a place of Karma Kandiya scholars. There may still be some. I mean, scholars means Shastras. So you'll meet people who are scholars, they learn it in Shastra. One time I went to this Sringeri, which is the seat of one of the Shankaracharyas. So I had some discussion with him. First he asked me if I could speak in Sanskrit, and I spoke about all the one or two sentences I could, and then we switched to Hindi. And it seemed he was actually quite pleased to discuss, because all the time people are coming and they just asking for blessings, and we actually had some Shastric discussion, and then we were discussing on basic Bhagavad Gita. He was giving his impersonal thing, and I was giving personal viewpoint, and there was some enjoyment for him to discuss. But I could understand that he was thinking, this is just some baccha. His knowledge of Shastra is vast. And if they discuss in Sanskrit with the Madhva Pandits, and they get very deeply into the grammatical exegesis of Tattvamasi, and then the Madhva scholars, they'll pull out the Nyaya Sudha. They'll have all these very deep, complex discussions. And here's me, just saying, Krishna says, aham, must be hum, a person. So I could see he was thinking, okay. So he was enjoying maybe for him it was amusing to see this Westerner trying to speak Shastra. At least he spoke to me. I mean, in previous generations they wouldn't have even looked They wouldn't have, just seeing a Westerner, they'd have to go and do 3 hours of rituals to get free from the contamination. Of course, they're already Brahmans, so maybe they're pure anyway. So, what point am I making? The point is that for all their scholarship, and you see on the other side there's the Madhva scholars who are equally learned, some of them, were written for a different era. They're from an era when people, you see, how did Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, even Shankaracharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how did they spread their teachings? By walking from village to village, because in those days in every village there were pandits, and they would meet with them and they would discuss and they would defeat them, and then that was the system, that you defeated someone and they would have to become your disciple. Or if they didn't want to become your disciple, then maybe you know what Ramanuja did in Melkote, the Jains who didn't want to, they had a discussion, and before the discussion they said whoever loses, they should become the disciple of the other or die. So 20,000 Jains Ramanuja defeated, and they didn't want to become his disciple, and it's not written in the modern biographies, but it is in the original Sanskrit Prapanamrita. So that's described. They had to die. So it was very serious. You see, people, they took it very seriously in those days. Nowadays, you discuss with someone, you must have had this experience. Sometimes you go through the whole process of discussing with someone, you defeat they bring up so many stupid things, you defeat them all, and at the end they say, well, I don't believe it. Then why did you discuss? But in those days, there were actual scholars in every village. People who, nowadays you see, if we meet someone who knows a few shlokas, you think, oh, scholar. Sometimes devotees say about me, scholar. Now that means that from your point of view, you think, but I lived in India, I've seen so many real scholars, big pundits. So, scholar, we know a few shlokas here and there, which mostly I forget anyway. So, there may be some real scholars, but those people who nowadays we think big scholars, actually, previously they would be considered just beginners. Nowadays, because there's no one else, they're considered great scholars. But in those days, who would be considered nowadays a great scholar of Shastra? Previously, there were people like that in every village. And they were very tremendous scholars. Because that's how people discussed, on the basis of Shastra. And so they went deeper and deeper and deeper in so many different points. So we'll find the traditional writings of these sampradayas, that there's so much detail, and if you try to discuss it, we can't even begin to understand it. So it doesn't really have that much relevance to preaching in the modern age, because people, they can't even begin to understand all things. First of all, you have to understand Sanskrit, and not just understand, but you have to understand all the different nuances of so many different philosophers. That's why previously to be an Acharya means that you not only know the philosophy of your own sampradaya, but you have to know in detail all the Shad Darshan. You have to know them all, and the different philosophies of different Vaishnava schools, because you'd meet and you'd be expected to discuss, and if you were defeated, then how could you be an Acharya? So you'd have to be vastly learned in philosophy, to an extent that we simply cannot imagine at the present time. So actually those days have passed. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam, Kalona, Stevana, Stevana, Stevaranyata. Nowadays people have no brains. And little bit of brain is there, and then they become an engineer or a doctor or something like that. So it's all wrongly directed. So, Prabhupada's books, they have all the essence of what all the Acaryas have given, but in a manner that is absolutely suitable for the present age. Which is one of the reasons why Prabhupada was able to be successful in preaching all over the world. If he had come and started speaking in a manner that his own spiritual master spoke in, then he could not have begun to communicate with people. They couldn't have begun to understand, because how his spiritual master spoke, even at the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, even at that time, there are many people who are very learned in Shastra, even in Bengal, which you won't find nowadays. There were real smarta pundits. Nowadays you won't find in Bengal at all. In some parts of India you'll still find a few smarta pundits of some sort. But at that time all over, and even in Bengal there were. So his manner of speaking and of writing was to to show that there are so many reasons. One thing is that at that time Vaishnavism was considered a beggar's religion. It's just for the illiterate people. In Bengal it was considered like that, mostly from very low caste, an uneducated kind of background. And there were so many discrepancies in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, all Sahajya and so many things. But he wanted to establish that this is the Vaishnavism is the apex of philosophical understanding. So he spoke in such a manner that scholars, they had to admit that he's in a different dimension to us. He was so learned in all kinds of Shastra, and his manner of presentation was so complex in English, Bengali, whatever language. He spoke in Sanskrit, in Hindi, that people were just amazed. They were nonplussed and awed by his tremendous scholarship. So Prabhupada, if he had presented at that level, it would not have been suitable for the modern age. He wouldn't have made any impact, because at least people in those days could understand that they could understand, they could catch something of what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was saying. And in the modern age, you see, even if we read his writings in English, it's very difficult to understand. Even the ideas he was presenting, they're so. Even if you can understand the language, but what concepts he's giving, what insights he's giving, it's very difficult to grasp. So Prabhupada, definitely not unscholarly by any means, but all the essence of what the Acaryas have given is in Prabhupada's books, but presented just with the essence so that we can understand. So if a disciple becomes more learned than his guru in terms of Shastric knowledge, that is nice. A father should wish that his son will become a greater person than he. Prabhupada wrote in one purport that by the grace of Lord Nityananda, a disciple may, by the grace of his spiritual master, is a purport about Lord Nityananda preaching in Bengal, whereas Chaitanya Mahaprabhu superficially wasn't able to do so. Lord Nityananda was. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to Nityananda, "You go and preach in Bengal, I can't do it. Too typical for me, you better go and do it." So Prabhupada wrote in the commentary, but that by the grace of the spiritual master, one may even surpass his own spiritual master. So, just like Prabhupada gave the example, the father is happy if the son is better than him. So, we hope, we pray that by the mercy flowing through the Sampradaya, that so many devotees, they will become great, pure devotees, great Acaryas, giving shelter to many, many thousands and millions of people. The world needs gurus, the world needs sadhus, the world needs Acaryas. So please take the gift that Prabhupada has given us, carried in parampara. Krishna consciousness is unlimited. So one may develop Krishna consciousness to an unlimited extent. As long one may develop Krishna consciousness to an unlimited extent, as long that is possible, as long as one maintains the consciousness, one thinks about himself. Jagai madhai hoite muishe papishta. Purishe kito hoite muishe logishta. Je mora naam shune tara punna khoi. Ja mora naam loi tara papa hoy. These are the words of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who is an empowered devotee, who has composed the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the most beautiful and authorized compilation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, philosophy and glories. He said that I am more sinful than Jagai and Madhai, and more insignificant than the worm in stool. Whoever hears my name, simply by hearing it, their pious activities are spoiled, and whoever says my name becomes sinful. And Prabhupada explained, he didn't write that. Sometimes we say, I am the most fallen. I'm the most fallen. You're not the most fallen. I'm the most fallen. So, we may say like that as a kind of, just to show I'm really a great Vaishnava, I should say, I'm the most fallen. But Prabhupada, he explained that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he actually felt like that. So if we actually feel like that, always, then we may perform very wonderful things in Krishna's service. Please perform wonderful things in Krishna's service. In the name of humility, one should not withhold the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Being humble doesn't mean that one doesn't preach. Being humble doesn't mean that you take the knowledge which you've received and don't distribute it. That's not humility. Humility means to go everywhere and preach very strongly and declare that this is the gift of my Guru Maharaj, of our Guru Varga, of our Gurus. That is humility. That very strongly asserting that yes, you take this Krishna consciousness because my Guru has given this, not that I am giving. That is humility, not to simply look down at the ground. No, look out. Very strongly take the message of Krishna. So one who is preaching, they may be blessed with so many opulences here. Shukracharya is cursing Bali Maharaj that you will lose your opulence very soon. Superficially it appeared like that. He lost his opulence. Everything was taken away. But actually he didn't. Because even from the material platform he lost his opulence, but then very soon he was given a position better than that of Indra's. But actually the opulence of a devotee can never be lost, because dhanna mor nityananda, the real wealth of a devotee is nityananda. The real wealth of a devotee is his devotion to Krishna. A devotee, even if he's apparently poverty-stricken, is richer than any so-called rich man of this material world. You must have seen this movie of Prabhupada, your ever well-wisher, Sally Agarwal, a young American lady. She's not young now, she might not even be alive now. But she was an ordinary American lady who married an Indian man, which is a little unusual. But she was more or less an ordinary American housewife. And somehow or other, Prabhupada came and stayed in her home. Amazing good fortune. So she spoke spontaneously. They came and interviewed her. They didn't ask her to write a script. They just interviewed her. And she said he was an old man from India, and he had no money and just a stick, but he said he was oceanic. She used the word just like a great ocean. So much opulence. Even she, an ordinary American housewife, she could appreciate that he had so much, which a materialistic person, however much they have, even if you have millions of dollars, they remain poverty-stricken because they don't have Krishna. So Prabhupada said, I have not come to the Western countries to take anything, but to give. What do you have to give? You have no money, you have no followers. Yes, Krishna. Krishna se toma, Krishna dite paro, tomara shakati ache. Amito kangal, Krishna Krishna boli, bhai tava pache pache. So devotee has the permanent opulence of devotion to Krishna. That will never be vanquished. That can never be destroyed. Everything else in this world will be destroyed. But if one has got the wealth of devotion to Krishna, that can never be destroyed. No, that can never be taken away. That is permanent wealth. Even from the external point of view, a devotee, they may have opulence, they may have money, and people may be, well, what is this? What kind of sadhu is this? But a devotee, Krishna may bless him with so much money because he doesn't think it's mine. He uses it all in Krishna's service. Even in family life, a devotee who fully depends on Krishna, this Krishna says, Ananya cheta satatam yomang smrati nitya shaham. Tasyaham sulabha, no, what's that? Ananyas chintayanto mang yejana paryupasati tesham nitya abhiyuktana yoga kshemam vahamyaham. One who has actual faith in this. Now you see devotees who say, I have to work, I have to get a job and all this. But even if you're a family man with 15 children, if you have full faith in this statement of Krishna, you don't have to do any job. Krishna will maintain you fully. Whatever you need, Krishna will give. Your family will not starve. They may even live in some opulence. Krishna is not bluffing. It's a fact. So devotees who have this attitude that everything belongs to Krishna, then so much money may come and they won't keep it for themselves. They give it all to Krishna. And then what happens? Krishna sends more money. You can become a millionaire. How? By giving all your money away to Krishna. You give to Krishna. And Krishna sees he'll give more. And then you give. I was just reading something, some devotees in Russia, which is not a rich country by any means. Russia is poorer than India. So one devotee started a business, and he had, from the very beginning, he had the idea that from the beginning I'm going to give 50% of my profits. Not invest in capital, then I'll build up, and then gradually when I get to a certain level, then I'll start giving. He said from the very beginning, the profit, I'm going to give 50% to Krishna. Very quickly his business became so big that his father, who was a total materialist, took up the same principle. And then his father, seeing it worked, he started giving 70%. And they just got richer and richer and richer. So if you give everything to Krishna, Krishna will make you a conduit by which His money flows. Take from the materialists and give it to Krishna. So don't worry, everything belongs to Krishna. Whatever opulence you have, Krishna can give you huge amounts. Actually, if we have full faith in Krishna, on one hand we have to be practical also. As we see Prabhupada, Prabhupada was very practical. He started businesses for earning money for the temples, and he started the life membership program because he knew some finances required. We shouldn't just expect that I'll sit here and chant Hare Krishna and then Krishna's going to walk up to me with a blank check on the Krishna Bank. There's a Lord Krishna Bank in Udupi, isn't it? Where is it? Kerala. Not from Kerala. So there's one private bank called Lord Krishna Bank somewhere, Kerala. So practicality is that one side, but on the other side, if we have the attitude that Krishna will give, then Krishna will give. One time I was at Rath Yatra parade in London, and the parade had just finished, and devotees were coming in. There was in one park they'd set up all the booths and this and that, and I was sitting chatting with Jayadvaita Maharaj, just waiting for the stalls to get started, and then we're going to start the questions and answers. It's called double punch, myself and Jayadvaita Maharaj. One thing I must say, that he's much heavier than me. Although we are interchangeable. So anyway, some lady came up and said, "Where do you get your money from? How are you maintained?" And he said, "Krishna sends everything." He said, yes, I understand, but well, how does it happen practically? And he said, practically everything comes from Krishna. He said, well, like, how do you get your food to eat? He said, well, Krishna arranges. She wasn't satisfied and she went away. 2 minutes later, neither of us had thought about prasadam or any such thing. 2 minutes later, the devotee came up with 2 big plates of prasadam and said, "Maharaj, please take prasadam." We didn't make any arrangement. We didn't even know there was prasadam arranged. Krishna arranges. Have faith in Krishna. We're studying Shastra just to see how those who have full faith in Krishna, they're never the loser. Bali Maharaj never lost anything. All his demon associates thought now he lost everything. He never lost anything. By giving everything to Krishna, he gained Krishna. Krishna became his servant. Hare Krishna. Is there any question?
Srila Prabhupada's most important contribution is his books.
I said that Srila Prabhupada's most important contribution is books. You know why I said that? Because Srila Prabhupada said that. Prabhupada wrote one time, "I can stop my preaching activities all over the world." He said this actually when it was about 1970, when the movement had hardly just begun. He said, "I can stop my traveling preaching activities all over the world, but I cannot stop my translation of my books because this is my service, is my main service to my spiritual master."
When we get Srila Prabhupada's books, there is so much to read. There are small books, there are Srila Prabhupada conversations, and Bhagavatam is there, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Generally, is recommended any general plan because there are thousands of pages to read.
Yeah. Well, it'll keep it up. That will keep us out of Maya, won't it? Then where's the time for studying the newspaper? If you have to study all of Prabhupada's books. Just a few days ago, at least I can say what I say to my disciples. Different gurus may say different things to their disciples. But he was asking me, he said he wants to make a program to take some time out every day and make a serious endeavor to read through all of Prabhupada's books, including the conversations, the letters and everything. I told him, more important, when you finish the Bhagavatam, more important than reading the conversations and the lectures, you go and read the Bhagavatam again. Because the books, Prabhupada himself stressed on that more. The conversation, not that we shouldn't read the conversations, but the books that Prabhupada composed, Prabhupada himself put more stress on that. So I recommend that you read Prabhupada's books, especially Prabhupada himself has emphasized the which four. Which four Prabhupada has emphasized? Which four books? Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Nectar of Devotion. So these books especially. You should read them many times. In fact, you don't stop reading. You just go on and on reading them. When you finish reading, you start again. So go on and on and on and on and on. And then you can also read, there are so many things to read. You can't read everything. Nowadays there are so many books coming out. There are many books I'd like to read which are being brought out by devotees. Unless you want to make your only service reading, then you can't read them all. So at least we should. It is important that we make Prabhupada, as Prabhupada said, he accepted books are the basis. So it's very important to have a solid basis in understanding Prabhupada's books. No, other books are there, but the basis is. I'm writing books also. Prabhupada said, my disciples will write purports on my purports. So that's there, but Prabhupada's books, that's the basis. There must be the basis of our Krishna conscious understanding. Isn't it? In general, if you're a student and you have good marks, then, and you're in Krishna consciousness, then people will think, okay, there's no harm in me being Krishna conscious. From that point of view, it's good. And if you do fail, then people may blame it on Krishna consciousness. But ultimately, the two things, they're quite different. From materialistic point of view, people may think like that. But ultimately, your failing or not failing has got nothing to do with Krishna consciousness. When Prabhupada was there mostly, just before Prabhupada got sick. So he taught so many nice things. He was my first traveling Sankirtan leader in England. So he told me many nice stories of Prabhupada, that Prabhupada used to tell him so many things. So he told me one time in the evening that he was in the room with Prabhupada and some sannyasis, and Prabhupada said to one sannyasi, go and give the Bhagavad Gita class, engage your mind. So thank you for calling me. Otherwise, I'd just be on the Manoratham. But now if you ask some questions about Krishna, then my mind can be engaged in Krishna. So you have some questions? Yeah, please. If you want, you can write down also. और हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं और मैं कोशिश करूंगा हिंदी में जवाब देना. Yesterday morning I was discussing the Bali Maharaj pastime, yes.
Position of Shukracharya and Bali Maharaj. Is Shukracharya devotee playing the role of a smarta, or
is Shukracharya a devotee playing the role of a smarta, or is he actually a smarta? I've never seen it said that he's a just for the sake of Leela, he's taking that position. Now, you see, sometimes in the Vedic literature, sometimes there are many such statements. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also said, abhakta hino cha. Those who are not devotees are fallen and rejected. There are many such statements that Shadkarma Nipano Vipra Mantra Tantra Visharadaha A Vaishnava Guru Nasyad Vaishnava Swapacha Guru, that even if one is very expert in all mantras and tantras, that means like Karma Kandi Brahmana, like Shukracharya, he's not fit to be a guru. Whereas even if one is born in a family of dog eaters, if he's a Vaishnava, he must be a guru. So there are many such statements rejecting persons who are not devotees. But on the other hand, we find that at least from the social point of view, persons, brahmanas, even if they're smartas, they're respected within Vedic culture for their Vedic knowledge, for their austerity. So he's a respectable personality. Once Prabhupada gave, he initiated a devotee with the name Durvasa Munidas. He's in Australia. He's still around there. So it's a strange, you might think it's a strange name, Durvasa Munidas. Because he was always doing things that seemed to be anti-devotional, such as, actually offending Ambarish Maharaj. Oh, he didn't take offense. Then he got Duryodhana to, Duryodhana got him to try to, the whole thing with the pot and Krishna taking he wanted that the Pandavas would be embarrassed by Durvasa Muni with his 60,000 disciples coming. But then on the other hand, we find Durvasa Muni, he was the one who gave the benediction to Kunti Devi also. Whether it was a benediction or whatever, but if there wouldn't be the Pandavas, there wouldn't be the Mahabharata. If it wasn't, it was all part of the plot, you could say. That he gave her the benediction that whichever demigod you call will come. He also gave the benediction to Radharani that whatever she cooked would be just like nectar. Of course, that's like Agni Dev giving the Sudarshan Chakra to Krishna, which is his personal weapon. We also find that Durvasa Muni is involved with so many. Well, there's one particular pastime with Krishna. That's a long story. Where the gopis, Krishna told the gopis, you should go to see Durvasa Muni. He's on the other side of the Yamuna. So bring him some gifts. So they went and said, well, how will we cross the Yamuna? Must have been the monsoon or something. So he said, you just say Durvasa Muni Upavasi. And you go and then the Yamuna will give you a pass. So they went and gopis sold big pots of milk and dahi and ghee and so many nice things. They brought it all to Durvasa Muni, he had it all. So then he said, well, how we go back over the Yamuna? Then he said, you just say Krishna Brahmachari. And then you go. So some joking is going on there. So anyway, Prabhupada said, Durvasa Muni, he is a great devotee and we can ask for his blessings that we can get Krishna Bhakti. So he didn't say he's a devotee, but he's involved in Krishna's pastimes and he's a great personality. So we should respect him. I've not seen it stated anywhere that he's actually devotee taking a different role. Although, that I was quoting that, Kavina Mushana Kavihi, that Krishna quotes that among all the learned persons, I am represented by Ushana, which means Shukracharya. So he's a great personality. That we can say. Was he a devotee before seeing Vishnu or after? No, he must have been a devotee before. Otherwise, where would he get the inspiration to offer everything to Vishnu? That stated that he had association with Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad, of course, was the son of a great demon. He was also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. As among the Daityas, Krishna is represented by Prahlad. But then Prahlad's son was Virochana, who was again a demon. not just by name, but he was a genuine demon, by occupation also. He was also a demon. Then Virochana's son was Bali Maharaj, he was playing the role of the king of the demons. He did his social duty properly, but his attitude was one of devotion to Vishnu, which he got that from he was associating with Prahlad Maharaj from early life. So he had that attitude of devotion, even though he did as the king of the demons, he acted as a good demon. He went and attacked Indra and took over the heavenly planets and did everything. He did his social duty, everything that a demon the king of the demons was expected to do. But then when the test came, do you want to surrender to Vishnu? Then immediately he took the opportunity. At great risk. You see, when we read the Bhagavatam, then we know what's going to happen afterwards. But Bali Maharaj, he didn't know for sure what was going to happen. So, but he had faith or whatever. I don't care what happens, but I'm going to surrender to Vishnu, whatever happens. And apparently in the beginning, the worst thing socially, he was humiliated. He was, the demons had all worked so hard for him. They'd done everything for his sake. It means they wanted to share in the spoils of the heavenly planets. But all their hopes were pinned on him. And then he was a traitor. It's something like, of course we could never imagine him doing it, but the demons couldn't imagine Bali Maharaj doing it either. It's something like our Prime Minister, Atal Bihari, going to, maybe what's his name, Musharraf comes, and then he just signs on a piece of paper. India is now subordinate to Pakistan. Take it. So can you imagine how the Indian people would feel? Of course, he doesn't have the constitutional right to do that. But I'm just giving you an example. That how would you feel? Or I'll give you an example. Now this will really, if you found out that the Indian cricket team had lost to Pakistan, and actually they had done it by bribery, then how would you, just like the Pakistan team lost in the World Cup last time to Australia, and they found out it was by bribery or something. It was rumored. So the Pakistani people, they're heroes. They wanted to kill them or whatever. So like that, traitor. Who likes a traitor? In Ireland, there was one member of the IRA. That's the Irish Republican Army, like a guerrilla group. So he knew all the all the names of all the people in the area where they lived, and he turned all their names over to the British government. And then he was in court, and even his own mother rejected him. She said, "It was the worst day of my life when I gave birth to you." Even his own mother rejected him. Traitor. No one likes a traitor. There's a word in English, quisling. Have you ever heard this word, quisling? It's a word which means traitor. So that word comes from the head of the Norwegian fascist party, who encouraged Hitler, please come and invade us. And then as long as Hitler was in power, he was the head of Norway under the Germans. And then when the Germans were defeated, he was hung by the Norwegian people for being a traitor. Collaborator. Someone who collaborates with the occupying forces. Just like you'll find, again from the Second World War in France, those young girls who thought, now the Germans are in power, so we can enjoy life, we'll be their girlfriends. So after the Germans were driven out, then they were paraded in the streets with their heads shaved. Nowadays they just kill them. They weren't so intense in them. So the kind of feeling, someone who cooperates with the enemy, they're despised, hated. Bali Maharaj, from the point of view of the demons, Vishnu was their enemy. And he cooperated with Vishnu I mean, he was considered just, from the worldly point of view, he was just a complete rogue. All his friends and the people who had put all their hopes in him, they were just disgusted and disappointed. But he risked all that because he knew that our only real friend is Vishnu. So, it's when we're discussing these leelas, it's always good to remember that we are reading them in hindsight. But when whoever's taking a decision to do something, that they never know actually. At the time, you don't know what's going to happen in future. Later we see. So Bali Maharaj was a devotee. That's the symptom of his devotion, that he risked everything for the sake of Krishna. Therefore he is the very embodiment of Atma Nivedanam. Complete surrender. We all have our buts, B-U-T. I'm not B-U-T. B-U-T. We all say but. I am fully prepared to surrender to Krishna, but just little something. We all have our reservations. We may think we're very surrendered, but the tests, we have to see when the test comes. Krishna will test us all. Now we're talking about chanting 16 rounds, trying to chant attentively and following the 4 principles. I say, now I'm really a devotee, but that chanting 16 rounds and following the 4 principles, that is admission to the school. That doesn't mean you passed. The tests are yet to come. You don't know when they'll come. It's not that you have on this date, at this day there will be the test. Actually, every moment there's a test, but there may be very severe tests. How much we're prepared to surrender to Krishna. It's very easy it's relatively easy to half surrender, but there's no meaning to half surrender. There's some things you have to do completely or not at all. You can't half marry someone, for instance. It's all or nothing. So surrender means full surrender, actually. So,
how can one make the mind a devotee?
How can you make the mind a devotee? That's the question. Bhajare bhajare amar manati manda. Bhaja braja vane radha krishna charana arabinda. Bhajan bina gati nai re. This is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. You worship Radha and Krishna within the forest of Vrindavan. Follow the process of sadhana. There's no other, bhajan vina gati naira, there's no other process than this. Then, throughout the song, he gives the names of so many devotees of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Smara, Mukunda, Murari, all the names of great devotees. So by remembering these devotees, we can also get strength and help from them. Apply ourselves to the process of Krishna consciousness. Many times we always say, how can we do this? How can we surrender? How can we give up our attachments? But follow the process and pray to Krishna and his devotees. You'll find everything. If you see this nectar of devotion, you'll find all instructions. Keep good association, remain enthusiastic, chant with attention, everything is in there. You read the nectar of devotion, the first half of the book, which gives practical directions how to be Krishna conscious. read this again and again and again and bring it into, follow it. Follow that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. We're explaining in the morning about the interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. That means how the Acaryas, Srila Prabhupada, have tried to give each and every word meaning as Bhakti, devotional service. And even Srila Prabhupada translates yogi as a devotee.
Sometimes.
Yeah. As opposed to the scholars, who say that how can you call in the yogi as a devotee or... So when we read sometimes like Karma Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, they also like Bhakti Yoga. Sometimes we are told in a similar way. Ultimately it's Bhakti Yoga only. So how exactly we have profound faith that actually this is a real meaning, and also when we are told by others how the different meanings are there, how we can convince others also? Like
I was saying also that Shivaram Maharaj, who you may know is one of Prabhupada's disciples and leaders of ISKCON movement. I don't think he's been here. But he's written a very logical and detailed book called the Bhaktivedanta Purports on Bhagavad Gita as it is, which show how every statement of Srila Prabhupada's is absolutely as it should be and incontestable. So it just may be, for instance, that Krishna is speaking of karma yoga, but then in the broader context, everything is ultimately Krishna is only teaching bhakti. So whatever instructions are applicable within karma yoga, they're applicable within bhakti yoga, and the full expression or the full sense of what Krishna is saying, that is applicable. What Krishna is saying is applicable to karma yogis, but the full sense of it is applicable in bhakti yoga. Just like the well-known verse, Kamanyevadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Well, that's the half verse. So, that is true in karma yoga, but the full expression of that is in bhakti yoga. So there's nothing wrong in saying, and actually the full expression of, or the full expression or the full manifestation of that instruction is possible in bhakti yoga. So actually when Prabhupada is so many instructions that how the yogi should control the mind, also fully applicable in Krishna consciousness. Karma yogi may understand that from a certain platform, and bhakti yogi understands it from the highest platform. You can get that book. That's a useful book for you to study, that book of Shivaram Maharaj's. All of you who have well-formulated powers of thinking, you can enjoy reading that, because it's not such an easy book to read. It requires application of the mind. It requires some fairly advanced logical thinking.
So similarly, how we can develop that faith that this is the real intrinsic meaning is bhakti?
That's what I'm saying. You read the book and then you'll get all the answers and then you'll understand. Actually, you can have faith anyway. Even without seeing. You see, this idea that we have to understand everything and then we'll believe it, this is not very reasonable. It's just like, before eating, first of all, you should analyze every item and understand what its nutritional value is, and that there's no poison in it. You can't do anything. You have to have some faith, otherwise you can't do anything. So, why not have faith? You think Prabhupada's cheating? You think he's misguided in illusion, Brahm Pramad, Vipralipsa, Karana, Partha? You think he's just making it up because he's biased? Why not have faith? You think you understand better? That's what it means. If you don't have faith, that means you think that you understand better than Prabhupada does.
Hare Krishna. Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, in Bhagavatam stated that Lord Shiva appeared from the forehead of Lord Brahma. But then, with common sense, it seems that Jiva Tattva, under which Lord Brahma comes, should be higher than the Shiva Tattva, Shambhu Tattva.
Yes.
But usually, Shambhu Tattva is higher than the Jiva Tattva.
Mm-hmm. So your common sense doesn't work here, does it?
Exactly.
We're not dealing with common personalities. Lord Krishna also appeared from the womb of Devaki. Does it make sense? Not according to common sense, it doesn't make sense. But we're dealing with extraordinary sense, which is above common sense. According to worldly sense, the goal of life is to eat, sleep, mate and defend. According to Krishna conscious sense, there are many things. It's a different way of thinking. Night and day, black and white. In fact, practically most of the things in Shastra don't make any sense according to common sense. I mean, even if you say that, well, Shiva Tattva shouldn't appear from Jiva Tattva, but then even if he does, why out of the forehead? Varaha Dev came out of the nostril of Lord Brahma. He's Vishnu Tattva, higher than Shiva Tattva. One of the reasons that I have great faith in the Shastra is because it doesn't fit common sense. Because I saw everything you see, the so-called common sense people, they're all the most idiotic people. Their common sense. It all ends up in ahara nidra bhayamaitunam cha. That's their common sense. If you ask me afterwards, I'll say what I was going to say, but I won't say it here openly. Prabhupada would sometimes say some things privately. He wouldn't say it openly. I've seen a person worshipping Krishna Lala deity with great reverence for hours, chanting various mantras, glorifying Krishna. He even does not worship any demigods, but by talking to him, we understand he has Mayavad understanding. How can we reconcile it? What is his position? He also possesses no belongings except Krishna's paraphernalia. Actually, I wanted to talk about this in the lecture next. I chose one verse discussing about Mayavad, so we can discuss it more. Maybe I wasn't going to get into it that deeply, but I was just going to make the general comment that many people who appear to be devotees are actually Mayavadis. You'll find this is very common all over India, that people are worshipping Krishna, but actually if you speak with them you'll understand they're Mayavadis. It's very, very common. Even in the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we see there was one Rama Bhakta who always chanted the names of Lord Ram, and he served Raghunath Bhatta Goswami by carrying his paraphernalia for him all the way to Puri, coming from Varanasi. When they reached Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he had some relationship with Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, this Ramdas, he kind of feigned a smile, but he wasn't actually happy to see him because he knew that within his heart he had the desire for moksha. His worship was like the worship of Putana, someone who comes looking as if they're very devoted, but actually their aim is to kill Krishna. So they're not actually devotees. Mayavad means, if there's Mayavad, there cannot be devotion. It's just the opposite. That's why you see, Prabhupada, he was always so strongly against this Mayavad. As long as this Mayavadi is within us, we can't actually be devotees. As long as we have any trace of this idea, I shall become one with God. I am worshipping Him, ultimately I become Him. As long as we have any sympathy for Mayavadis, we cannot actually be devotees. Like I was saying about Shukracharya, we can offer them some respect, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered respect, because they may be, in some cases, they may be learned, austere, renounced, all these things. So we can offer them some worldly respect, but their envy of Krishna, cannot make any adjustment with that. So how is it like that? Then that also in the Nectar of Devotion you'll see that's discussed. How sometimes impersonalists, they appear to be like devotees. But that's just like a shadow, it's not actual devotion. They don't, for all their supposed service, they don't actually have the attitude of service, but they have the attitude that they want to enjoy Krishna or exploit Krishna. They don't have a mode of surrendered service. Even they may speak of seva, bhakti, surrender, all these things. If you discuss further, you'll find they don't actually have the mode of service. They don't want to surrender to Krishna. They're Mayavadis. Yeah. What are followers of? If the followers of Mayavadis, they don't know the philosophy, but they're contaminated by association. Definitely they imbibe the same contaminated ideas. And if you discuss with them, then they're not going to... Even if people have no philosophy, if you discuss with them, they're going to come out with Mayavad and all these things, because that's their contamination. No one's going to speak the philosophy of pure Vaishnavism unless they associate with pure devotees. Question, is it true that at every point in time there is a Nitya Siddha physically present? I've never seen it stated like this. This is usually said by people who want to advertise themselves as Nitya Siddhas, or who want to advertise that my guru is a Nitya Siddha and all others are useless. Usually people who are advertising like this, they're on some kind of personality cult trip. This is what I've seen. Otherwise I've never seen it stated in Shastra that there's always a Nitya Siddha physically present on the planet at every time. There may be. But then you see, everyone, what happened, people say this and say, oh, you see, he's saying that it must be, he himself he must be the one, or his guru is the one. And you see, maybe my guru is not good enough. And there's a lot of people who say like this, you see, you have to go to this guru, and then it's only by association with this Maha Bhagavat, then only you can be Krishna conscious, and all these other people are bogus. There are people who say like that, they're usually very fanatical, but we don't see that practically we don't see that they're more advanced than others. It's just some kind of problem. You have to hear from this particular person, then only you can become advanced, and you're wasting your time with all others. It's actually very insidious kind of preaching to cut at the roots your faith in the personalities who have brought you to Krishna consciousness and are guiding you in Krishna consciousness, and to try to grab people into their little cult. So you just see the people who are talking like this, are they actually advanced in Krishna consciousness, or is it just some fanaticism? You'll say it's some fanaticism. I don't see the people who make this propaganda that they actually become so much greatly advanced than others. They might talk about the gopis and this and that, but talking about the gopis doesn't remove your material desires. You have to actually surrender to Krishna. Another point is that even if you have, Radharani directly as your guru, or, whoever it may be, still you have to surrender. You have to find the greatest Maha, Ashto Tarashata, Ekhazar Shata, or whatever it may be. Maha, Paramahamsa, Nitya Siddha, and this, that, whatever it may be, you still have to surrender to Krishna. The Guru can give you instruction, but you have to surrender to Krishna. So it's not that you just go and you go to Maha, Ashto Tarashata, Shri, Nitya Siddha, Vrajvasi, this, that, and you simply sit and he speaks, and then all of a sudden you get Krishna praying. This is Sahajiya nonsense, which is widely broadcast in the name of Gauriya Vaishnavism, and it's just nonsense. You have to surrender. And again, the same thing, even if he is Nitya Siddha, Maha, Prem, this, that, and the other, it doesn't make that much difference to you, because you have to learn to control your mind and senses. Just like a 5-year-old goes to school. He has to learn, first of all, arithmetic. Later on, he might, if he goes through all the different processes, he might end up as an atomic physicist. But at the age of 5, it won't make that much difference to him whether Einstein's his teacher or whether just, some ordinary teacher, because he has to learn the basics first of all. So even if you do have Einstein as your teacher, he still has to teach you, first of all, 1 + 1 = 2. So someone says that you have to have a Nitya Siddha as a guru, and by the way, I'm a Nitya Siddha. I didn't really mean to say that, but you can recognize a Nitya Siddha by the sim. You see, I know one supposed Nitya Siddha who happens to be born in a Vrajvasi Brahmin family and strictly observes Kartik fasting every year. So he has written a book in which it said that you should only accept as a guru someone who is born in a Vrajvasi Brahmin family and who strictly follows Kartik Vrata. Not referring to anyone in particular, but whatever he happens to be doing, he makes this the qualification. But that's not what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. He said, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nasi, Shudra Kene Noi, Jai Krishna Tatvarita, Shri Guru Hoy. And you say, well, they said know the Siddhanta in all detail, and someone may be very expert in one part of the Siddhanta, but someone may be very learned in Shastra, but who knows all the Shastras? It may be that someone can come and he's particularly learned maybe some things from the 10th canto or the 11th canto or whatever, but then you ask him something from the Upanishads and exposition of Sankhya philosophy, he'll be lost. So because he's very expert in one part of Shastra and he talks from this particular part of Shastra, you think he knows everything. So there are many personality cults by people who want to advertise themselves, and there are many people who are attracted to such things because they're under this impression that you just go to a guru and he blesses you and then you become self-realized. That's not the process. What does the cloth worn by a sannyasi really mean? What do you really mean? You see here the question, Nitya Siddha physically present. If yes, who is after Srila Prabhupada? Who is that one? Why one? Prabhupada, when he was asked who will be the leader after you have departed, Prabhupada said, all my disciples, those who follow. That's it, it's simple. But we are looking for we always look something special. I'm so special, I have to find the special one. The others, they're just ordinary. I've got the special secret which makes me better than others. Saffron, what is the cloth made by a sannyasi? What does it mean? What does the cloth mean? It shows you in the sannyas ashram. That's all. You can distinguish between grihastas and brahmacharis. Is the super soul present in the spiritual world also? Krishna's there. If he's not there, it wouldn't be the spiritual world. He's the super soul.
Continuing from this point, Maharaj, the so-called gurus advertising themselves for popularity. Especially these days we see there are so many TV serials that have sprung up. Especially it has become kind of commercialized to have gurus on television. And many a times even it happens that we come across people who are watching such things. So can you describe what are the things that go on in the name of that? One. And secondly, how to preach to such kind of
Actually, I don't watch these things. But I've been told that mostly the successful TV gurus are the ones who tell lots of jokes, and they laugh a lot, and tell a lot of stories. They don't say anything about God. And so I don't really know. I don't watch them. How do we preach to them? We have to impress upon people that spiritual life is much more serious than a TV commercial. You can tell people that anyone who poses to be a guru but doesn't teach, doesn't give you any restrictions, then he's cheating you. There must be some The first thing, there should be some restrictions in spiritual life. This whole thing about the Nitya Siddha after Prabhupada, I was more referring to things going on within or on the periphery of ISKCON. I wasn't talking about TV commercial gurus. I mean, sometimes we have the idea that, ISKCON is just utopia, but there are so many funny things. People can take advantage of the good name of Prabhupada also to cheat others also, so you have to be. That doesn't mean that everyone's cheating in the name of Prabhupada. Don't take it that way. But there is one guru who has become very prominent, advertising himself that I am the actual, only real follower after Prabhupada. And if you want to understand Prabhupada, you have to understand through me. Although Prabhupada never said that. He says that, and some people are foolish enough to believe him. So these things are going on. You may not have experience of them, but you may have in future. Or someone else may come. At any time, you see, someone can come with some new idea. It happens all the time. Someone will come with... Recently, in Bombay, he left ISKCON and became a guru. And he's preaching some process which is slightly different from that which is given by Prabhupada. And he's saying in the name of Prabhupada, and making so many disciples without giving them any restrictions. So he's become very popular. Easier path, you see. You just take initiation immediately and you don't have to follow any principles. You just chant the name of Gauranga more, because you'll get more mercy like that. The people are because people think it's just like, you see, they're given advertisement, buy 2, get 1 free. So people are in that mentality, you see. If you come to ISKCON, 16 rounds, 4 regulated principles, so many things, then you get initiated. And then you go to so-and-so who is, dresses the same way, talks pretty much the same way, talks about Prabhupada, this, that, and says, you can take initiation from me, and just chant whatever you like and do whatever you like. And you say, oh, really? Oh, okay. Cheap, it's a special offer. You get the same benefit as getting initiation in ISKCON, but without all the hard work. Sounds pretty good. But it's not the same thing. You get what you pay for. You want a cheap initiation? The whole process will be cheap.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we understand that in order to go to spiritual world, you require a spiritual body. But in Bhagavatam, we hear that 4 Kumaras and even Durvasa Muni went to Vaikuntha. So, could you please explain on this aspect?
Of course, anything is possible by the grace of the Lord. And for the Lord, there's no difference between material and spiritual anyway. Even we find Dhruva Maharaj went in his self-same body back to Godhead. So, if you're going to reside in the spiritual world, then you'll be awarded a spiritual body, but the Lord may allow others to come. That's up to His discretion. The rules are there, and the Lord can adjust the rules according to His own convenience.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In Bhagavatam first canto purport, it is said that the educated and the intelligent persons must come forward and take up this process. But in the morning Bhagavatam class, we said that this modern education is an obstacle for spiritual progress. So how we can understand these two statements?
Yeah. Both statements are there by Acaryas. Educated people, actually we could say that there is some possible benefit to modern education or any education. At least the brain starts to move, then you can apply the thinking function to the Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan. Of course, you have all that garbage in your head to deal with also. In some ways, less educated people it's easier for them to take to Krishna consciousness. They don't have so much garbage in their heads. They don't have so many doubts and misconceptions, and they can chant Hare Krishna very easily. Prabhupada is talking about educated people taking to this movement just because for a movement, for an organization, to move in this and to work in this world, it requires people who can take leadership. So anyone can become a devotee, but people who have material qualification, then they're more suitable people to take leadership and to move in a world of educated people and to get things done. So, if you're educated how to live in this world and work in this world, you can use that to spread Krishna consciousness also. For bhakti, this education, non-education, there's no difference. In fact, that non-education, that may be better if the mind is not full of so much garbage. But Prabhupada wrote in one letter, he said about preaching to college students because we need people who can take leadership. So anyone can take the bhakti, but for practical organization and preaching and among the educated classes, it requires people who can move on that level. But we should always remember that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is meant for everyone, and one of the features that's stressed always is how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu patra pichana hinahishtanashtan jeja pai tare deo premodan. That they never considered who is qualified, who is less qualified, what is a proper place for spreading Krishna consciousness, what isn't. Whenever they got the opportunity, they preached Krishna consciousness and gave Krishna prema. So we should always remember this, that at that time the religious rituals was the monopoly of the Brahmanas, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu broke that. Everyone can take to Krishna Bhakti, so we should remember that. Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone. It is a fact that people who are like educated and intellectual, they're almost like different people to those who are not. Their mental and intellectual needs are quite different. Their whole way of thinking is quite different. In many cases, their behavior and how they deal and how they talk, it's almost like a different kind of person. It's quite prominent in India, where there is quite a big difference between more educated people and less educated people, but it's there all over the world actually. You get, in the West you get blue collar workers and white collar workers. It means like factory workers and office workers. And there's definitely a difference between, even in the West, between intellectual types and the non-intellectual types. But Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone. We should be careful not to make it like something kind of exclusive. Inclusive. Include everyone. Except those who are envious of Krishna. And then we should try to make them non-envious of Krishna. So, anything else? Are we over time or what? Before coming to ISKCON, I've done one Siddha Samadhi Yoga course. They're telling about the soul, they're teaching meditation. And they do bhajan. But they don't tell anything about Krishna Bhakti and devotional service. How they're telling about the soul and not telling anything about the source of the soul. Well, that's quite common among Mayavadis. Mayavadis say, Aham Brahmasmi. They recognize the spiritual platform and the existence of the soul and the difference of the soul between the body. But they don't recognize the supremacy of Krishna. So they could be said to be, they have the beginning stages of spiritual realization. But if they don't recognize the supremacy of Krishna, then even their recognizing the existence of the soul ends up in a big disaster, because they identify themselves as the supreme. I'm going to discuss this more in the lecture just coming up, which it's almost time for that. Right? Is the arti going on or what? We understand that Krishna does not force us to love or surrender to Him, but at the same time, we hear that Krishna has, what's the next word? Designed this world full of suffering to make us frustrated so the soul may love and surrender to Him. Explain these two aspects. Please kindly explain. Yeah, Krishna doesn't force us to surrender to Him, but He gives us good instruction, and He gives us a miserable situation where we can understand that without surrendering to Him we can never be happy. But the misery of this material world, it's not really made by Krishna. Parusha sukha dukhanam bhukchitve hetu. Yes. The so-called sufferings and happiness in this material world, it is not caused by Krishna, it is caused by the conditioned soul himself. Because of his activities, he brings upon himself various reactions. So we can say Krishna is the ultimate cause in the sense that Krishna designed the whole setup, but the living entity has the choice to act in various ways, and if he acts wrongly, just like if the government makes the law that thieves will be imprisoned, well, you can't blame the government if someone steals and is imprisoned. The government made the law, but the person broke it, and he chose to break it, and he's getting the result of doing so. So it's not Krishna's fault that this world is full of suffering. It's the conditioned souls who have misused their opportunity. Krishna doesn't tell us to forget Him and to be sinful and envious. We choose to do so. Who asked this question about Siddha Yoga? Who's that? Who is that? Yes, sir. Yeah. Are you reading Srila Prabhupada's books? Just starting. Yeah. You read regularly and come and study regularly, and in course of time, you'll be saved from Siddha Yoga. Now you're bewildered. You can't understand what that means. But when you understand what Krishna consciousness is, then you'll understand how misleading these so-called other processes are. Real Siddha Yoga is Krishna conscious. The real Siddhi is Krishna Prem Bhakti. Anything else or not? Yeah. We have to associate with Vaishnavas with discrimination. That means that we should associate with Vaishnavas who possess discrimination, or we should have discrimination in associating with Vaishnavas.
We should have discrimination while associating with Vaishnavas.
Yeah.
Rupa Goswami says this in the NOI. So, to what extent is it right to judge the level of other Vaishnavas? Because Bhakti goes on over several lifetimes.
Yeah, it's required. Rupa Goswami gives us his Upadesh, how to associate with various levels of Vaishnava. So I think the answer is given in the question itself. How do we discriminate? Dikshasti chet pranati dish chabajam tamisham. Well, it was that verse. How's that? Yeah, like that. That according to Rupa Goswami's direction, that we should mentally honor those who have taken up the process of Krishna consciousness, offer obeisances to those who are initiated, and worship and serve those who are nindadishan, those who are free from the propensities of unnecessarily criticizing others. And then you say, well, you may criticize someone by saying that, but calling a spade is not criticism. The propensity to enviously and maliciously malign devotees, that is obviously not the symptom of topmost Vaishnava. But on the other hand, it is the duty of a Vaishnava to point out what are the discrepancies in devotional service so that we can avoid them, and we should avoid associating with that. Also we see Kapila Dev says there are different kinds of devotees, those who are separatists. So these instructions are there, we should see. We should understand, anyone who's taken devotional service, that is glorious. But at the same time, we don't want to intimately associate with persons whose association will not help us to advance in Krishna consciousness. That doesn't mean that we're rude to them, but that we don't. Associate means, particularly this close association, which is also defined by Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, especially this guhyam akhyati prichyati. We don't reveal our minds or become very close to persons who we can see are not very serious about devotional service, or have some other motivation or whatever. The other things, giving prasadam, taking prasadam, offering gifts, that may go on, but especially this revealing our minds in confidence, that should be done among advanced devotees. And we should discuss Krishna consciousness among devotees who have faith in Krishna and who don't have a very doubtful nature, who take pleasure in discussing Krishna, all these things.
Maharaj, in Chaturmas we abstain from certain food items like leafy months in first month and so on. So, can you just tell us what is the significance of leaving different items in different months?
Well, Prabhupada himself comments in the purport that on the whole one is supposed to give up sense gratification. So it's not a very great sense gratification to give up. Although it's funny, at that season, what's the first month is Ashvin, no? So that season when there's rain, it's already a lot of rain. So that's the season when there's more. In Bengal especially, there's all different kinds of what's called a shark. So, it just says that giving up sense gratification. But to tell, you can follow, I follow these things actually, but apparently Prabhupada himself didn't follow. He just put in the purport because his own guru put in the purport. And actually you'll see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that he used to follow these things. Even today in the Gauriya Math, they follow more strictly. But Prabhupada didn't stress it. Actually, in the Western countries, Chaturmasya has no meaning anyway, because there's no rainy season there anyway. Prabhupada put more stress on preaching Krishna consciousness than following Chaturmasya. Some of his disciples who were living in the Dham in Mayapur, he sanctioned, okay, you follow, but then you should follow strictly. Nowadays you see if someone can chant 16 rounds and follow 4 regs, that's pretty good. And extra austerities, if you can follow, alright, but more important is to associate with it. Just like one of the principles of Chaturmasya, you should remain within the same building for 4 months. You shouldn't go outside your house. And you can't come to the temple. Better you come to the temple. Sometime in the name of pointing out discrepancies in ISKCON devotees, some devotees go on criticizing almost all devotees, always they speak about. How to deal with them? Well, you could point out good qualities in the persons that they're criticizing. Suggestion.